Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. My name is Jess Lisi, and I am the Partnerships and Events Manager here at DASA. And today, I'm excited to welcome you to the kickoff episode of our Experience Management mini-series, Selling Experience Management at C-Level. I am delighted to introduce you to our speaker for today's episode. I would like to welcome Mark Smalley, IT Management Consultant and Coach at Smalley.it, as our distinguished guest for today. In fact, Mark published a book by the same name just in time for the webinar, which is available on Amazon. And when we talk about experience management, Mark mentions in his previous book that the crux of experience management is not only having the capacity to care, but also the ability. And I can say with multiple books and multiple, accomplishments, publications behind him, experience management is a topic that Mark very much cares about. And with that, the floor is yours, Mark.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you. And thanks again for being the catalyst for this new book. It was funny how it came about because we were chatting at the end of September about this webinar. You'd invited me to do a talk, and I was thinking, what sort of stuff are we going to talk about? And what triggered me was experience I've had myself in the past of trying to articulate IT stuff to senior management and making the mistake of talking about the feature. Now, do you remember that film, The Wolf of Wall Street?
I do. I think most people do. It's quite a
that's right. There's that sell me this pen. Sell me this pen.
Yes.
And you, if you remember, the aspiring salespeople in the sales seminar are doing their best to sell a pen, but they're making the cardinal mistake of focusing on the features of the pen instead of demand, instead of the benefits. And that's what we often do in IT. We are absolutely absorbed by the features, but translating it into terms that your audience, in particular, if you're talking to executive level, not interested in the details, but what's it going to do and for whom? So that triggered the thought. So I said I'd talk about that. And then a couple of days later, I realized there's probably enough material in this topic for a book. And a week later, I had a draft, sent it to half a dozen or more people who kindly gave me some dreadful feedback on it. So I improved it. I got it out just I think it came out Friday. Anyway, it's on Amazon now. And if you like to take a look at the book on Amazon, if you click on I think it's called Read Sample, there's a free sample, which gives you a pretty good idea of what's in the book. So that's get that for nothing. Or you can stay around and listen to this mercifully short. The book's short as well. The presentation is also short, 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe. So hopefully plenty of time for any questions you might have. Now, I won't do much of a personal introduction other than to refer to the books, the topics I'm interested in, represented by the books I've written recently. Past 5 or 10 years ago, I seem to have got into the habit of writing books. And I've highlighted 3 here. From left to right, I've got them in here as well. The XLA pocketbook, which is the first book I wrote on XLA, where I didn't write it. I was the content editor. Marco Gianotton is really his baby, but I had a hand in that as well. And then the reflections on there was a reflection there, isn't there? Reflections on XLA, which is sort of explains what I think XLA is. And now we've got the 3rd book, which is hopefully physically arriving Thursday. So I can't show it yet. So I'm referring to those 3 books for today. Now, assuming if you've registered for this session, you've probably got some interest in XLA. So and probably some knowledge of it as well. So I'm not going into XLA at all in detail, just sufficing with a reference to a post on LinkedIn called Free XLA, where I list several publications, free stuff, paid stuff, that you can take a look at if you want a bit more understanding about what XLA actually is. But just going through it very briefly at the level of the why, the what, and the how, that's sort of pretty easy to explain what it is. The why is very basic. People deserve better IT service. As an IT industry, we made quite a mess of treating people, not with intent, but just by not paying attention to the right things, I think. So that's really, you could almost say that's the moral imperative. People deserve better IT service. What are we talking about? Not only a better human experience, typically mostly for users, but you can think about the providers as well. Better human experience, but also more business impact. So thinking not only about the output of your work, but the outcome in the sense of what's it doing, what kind of business impact has it got. We'll dive into that later. How do you do it? Three major things. You discuss, and it's not just about making agreements. I'd say the emphasis is more on having a discussion with the user organization and then possibly making formal agreements about the desired service experience, then trying to work out how to measure it, which is not easy. And finally, but most importantly, improving the actual service interactions where the experience emerges, because that's where it happens. So, you can agree stuff and measure stuff, but if you don't improve the actual service interactions, not much is going to happen. So that's how you do it and what you need for that, formulated it as outcome-oriented values, skills, processes, tools as well. That's more at a sort of a tactical level, what you need. And at a more strategic level, it sounds like a strange word in an IT presentation, but contrition for past sins, your crimes, digital crimes against humanity, that's stuff we've done in the past. So really that moral imperative, we want to treat people better. Then a conviction that XLA is going to help you. And finally, a commitment to actually do something about it. Final point of clarification on this introductory thing on XLA itself. I use XLA in two ways. If I start with an article, A or the XLA, I'm talking about documentation. Compare it with a service level agreement, an agreement. But you can also use XLA without A or the as the concept of agreeing the desired experience and making sure that experience happens. And that's also known as experience management or IT experience management. So it's terms that mean more or less the same thing. So that's just sort of sketching my understanding of XLA. Now, summarizing the book before I go into a few parts not in great detail, but just to give you the flavor of the assertions I'm making. First and foremost, you've got to understand the executive landscape, C-level landscape, and understand that what you'd obviously assume, that executives focus on rational business drivers, but what might not be obvious, depending on your experience, is the corporate politics that's going on. You're dealing with people, and you're often dealing with ambitious people in a competitive environment, and they're looking at their own position in the organization. So it's good to be aware of that as well, seeing how you can align with their personal agenda as well as the business agenda. Second one is, how do you bridge the gap between your perspective as an IT manager, consultant, professional who sort of bought into the concept of XLA, knows the benefits, understands that it's a good thing, but the challenge of articulating that at a level in language that your executive audience understands. Third part is borrowing, this is not new, borrowing the consultative selling approach, and I'm talking about selling it to executives. But unless you're an external provider, you're not selling it. I'm assuming you're an internal IT manager. You're trying to sell the initiative, so you're selling it in quotes to the executive. But you still use the same principles that is used in sales, where the salesperson, sales consultant, helps the client to develop a vision of what they need, the kind of capabilities, the kind of performance that they need in their organization to solve their problems. Once they sort of bought into this buying vision, the solution is, I won't say it's an afterthought, but it's more of a shoe-in than when you're trying to sell the solution itself. So you've got to sell the need for the solution first, and then it sort of naturally fits in. Fourth of 8 topics is realizing that people differ, people have different preferences, different attitudes to life, to business, different psychologies, and it's good to know the kind of emotional drivers, I've called them, kind of motivators that that you also have to resonate with. The final 2 chapters of the book, chapter 5, talks about the various cases you have for selling XLA. There's the operational case where you're talking about customer experience, more sales, higher prices, lower costs, lower risks, or short-term stuff. You've got the strategic case where you're talking more about the strategic positioning of an organization, thinking about your brand, for instance. And then what I've called the virtuous case, which is appealing to to a moral imperative to treat people decently. Finally, not unimportantly, is that this is not only applicable to XLA, selling XLA to executives, but almost any other IT investment. We'll dwell on that for a bit, because that's something, in fact, that was, I think in hindsight, that was why I thought about this topic, because in a past life, I was one of DASA's first 3 global ambassadors, together with Paul Wilkinson and Stefan Brendel. And that was about 2017, 18, I think. I wrote a white paper, which I'll show at the end of the presentation, which was about, I think it was called The Business Value of DevOps, but it was very similar to this. So it was probably that paper that triggered the thought that this would be a good presentation. So so you could also apply this for selling agile as a concept, DevOps as a concept, to executive level as well. Right, so that's those 2 slides, those 8 points have given you a flavor of what I'm going to talk about. Now, the first topic, understanding C-level. I've listed various fairly good lists of rational business drivers, costs, revenue, sales, complying with regulations, sustainability, this kind of stuff, all stuff that makes sense from a rational point of view. Obviously, you have to appeal to some kind of rational business logic, but at the same time, you have to think about the executive, the person that you're selling to, and their personal agenda. What kind of corporate politics are they involved in? What are their plans? Are they going to stay around in the organization for a long time? Are they going to leave at the end of the year? Do they want to make their mark? Do they want an initiative to align with certain corporate programs, for instance, because you get bonus points for that? All things that you think that's not rational, but it's dealing with people. So you've got to align with their business agenda and personal agenda as well. And also take into consideration the risks of implementing this stuff, because executives certainly don't want to be associated with yet another IT failure. So you've got to sell this as something that you know what's going to cost, more or less. You've identified the risks. You've identified mitigating factors. So make it as easy as possible to to support or endorse. And that little triangle in the middle, it's interesting. That's you could call it a triangle. I call it a triad. It's a concept that I borrowed from Dave Snowden, who you might know from the Cynefin framework. He uses this in his sense-making stuff, where you draw a triangle between three competing factors. They could be positive, they could be negative. All three positive, all three negative. And then you place a dot in the middle to identifying what needs the most attention. So you could think about this in a particular situation where you want to sell something. Where do you need to place most attention? Interesting concept, the triads. Now, going into consultative selling, the idea is that the customers, you're talking with a customer or with the executive, and somewhere there's pain. If there's no pain, there's no point in talking with anybody about it. So stakeholders are suffering from something that's going wrong. The system, using the organizational system, doing something wrong, is performing wrong performance, wrong capabilities. So got a problem. Okay, what's the problem? So the salesperson is trying to help the customer identify what kind of capabilities, what kind of performance do we need to have in order to alleviate the pain. And once you, as a customer, once you think, oh, hang on, if our organization could do this and that, then we'd reduce the pain. So now I've got this, I bought into this concept. It's called a buying vision. I also call it a capabilities vision. This is what I need. Okay, it's that. And then the salesperson or the consultant says, by the way, we happen to have this product, this solution that will provide you with these capabilities. And then it's much easier to sell your solution once you've sold, or once the customer sold to themselves, the concept that this is going to help me solve my problem. That's a really, really powerful concept. Developing a buying vision or a capabilities vision with the customer, and that's something I dive into in the book, of course, in a bit more detail. Then we have the emotional drivers that modulate those three factors that I spoke about a couple of slides ago: business drivers, corporate politics, and implementation risks. Depends on the psychology of the person, the characteristics of the person, what they'll be most interested in. I did a bit of research on this, referring quite extensively to work that I think I've just pointed out here, that orange book on my bookshelf, Seth Godin, This is Marketing. He's got a good take on what motivates people. I've used some of his work and other people's work as well to come up with these psychographic profiles, which I've clustered for ease of to talk about them in four major areas: people who are interested in success and achievement, security and stability, community and impact, innovation and growth. You try and visualize somebody, you'll probably be able to fit them into one of these boxes. Of course, it's more complex than that. People have multiple interests, but it gives you something to think about. And you should tailor your pitch, your XLA pitch accordingly, emphasizing things like, if you're dealing with somebody who's obviously going for success and achievement, they want to make their mark, talk about performance goals. Whereas if you're talking about somebody who's more interested in fostering a community, at work or possibly broader, talk about an inclusive environment. So resonate with the kind of things that they're interested in. So you're talking about the same solution, but you're looking at it from a different perspective. That's the idea there. Going into the penultimate chapter of the book, the cases for XLA. Operational case, where you're talking about improving customer satisfaction. Certainly, if your IT solution is something that customers use, you'll achieve that directly by improving the experience. But you can improve it indirectly by improving how your own employees can do their work, so they can help the customers. So you're talking about employee engagement, customer satisfaction, more sales, higher risks. more sales, higher prices, lower costs, lower risks. That's more on the operational side. Strategic case is more interesting because if your identity as an organization is associated with how you treat people, as part of your brand, that you deliver a good experience or stage a good experience for people, then that's part of your brand value, part of your reputation. So if it can an XLA initiative tie in with that as well. Because if that's the case, if you build your brand, that will lead to market share, revenue growth, and those kind of things. You could tie it into ESG responsibility as well, environment, social, and governance stuff. I think the most powerful case is the virtuous case, the desire to treat people decently. And this could be an individual belief of the executive, the person that you're speaking with, that they're motivated by doing the right thing, or it might be part of the organization's culture to treat people decently. I think these are probably the most powerful cases, but it might be a combination of two or even three of these. So that gets you thinking about, I developed these in the book as well. So that gets you thinking about the kind of cases to make. Now, finally, moving on to how you could apply this to IT in general, this is something that I've developed. I'll show you the white paper I did for DASA in a minute, but this is probably about the 10th variation on this theme of how do you translate IT effort into business results. And you can see sort of typical stuff at the top: more sales, higher prices, those kind of things you want to aspire to. But then think about, how can I achieve that? And what I've called business performance here. For instance, if you want happier customers, then you'll probably want to up your performance on your stakeholder focus, that cell in the middle there. If you want to be more responsible, more sustainable environment, you could think about improving your responsibility. So you could think about, so we've got to improve our business performance. Then going down a lower level, which part of the business model and you can see this, if you're familiar with the business model canvas, you'll recognize these 9 elements in the business model canvas. Which of the elements in the business model do I need to change in order to up my business performance? And then the question, sort of divide between business and IT, what kind of IT performance will help me change the business model so that I can achieve the business performance to get the business result? And so, and then finally, what part of the IT operating model do I need to tweak in order to? So this gives you a way of articulating. You can do it top down and bottom up. If you take the very technical example of server consolidation, or for instance, moving your service to the cloud, start at the bottom. In your operating model, you're talking about technology. It's the technology part of information and technology. Because you're outsourcing, you're talking about partnerships, relationships, and contracts with third parties. The IT performance is probably going to improve your warranty, because the performance of the cloud servers is probably going to be better than your in-house performance. It will probably it might reduce your costs, but it will certainly shift your cost pattern from capital expenditure to operational expenditure. If you put things in the cloud, instead of having servers, you've got rid of them, so you've just got operational costs instead of capital expenditure. Might make you more adaptable. You might even have the case for sustainability. Putting your stuff in the cloud improves your sustainability as IT. Then you can translate that. We're just talking about technology, about servers here. How does that translate to the business model? Well, it's probably doing two things. It's reducing your cost or changing your cost structure, and it might be improving the performance of your business activities if they are disrupted less frequently. Let's assume that. How does that translate into business performance? makes you more resilient because you've got fewer disruptions, makes you more efficient or more productive because it costs less, or you're doing more with the investment you've done. How does that translate to the top line? Servers now to the cloud. Well, probably lower cost and lower risks. So, but it just illustrates that you can use this, and this isn't comprehensive. This is a pretty decent collection of stuff that you can think about, but you add other elements as well. It's more about the way of thinking that you translate stuff either from top down or bottom up. And I find it quite useful to articulate things. So that's highly recommended. And this is the white paper I wrote for, and I've got the physical version here. Still got lots of these. Can't get rid of them.
Yeah, we posted in the chat.
Yeah. And this is still on the. There's the white papers on the DASA site, and there's a recording of a webinar that I did on the topic as well. And you can see that this little model on the right-hand side here, similar kind of structure to what I just presented. The idea that you translate technical stuff, you articulate that in terms of the end results. So that's the link back to DASA, and that's it. So this is a summary of the topics I spoke about, and a couple of the slides just to remind you of it. And are there any questions, Jess?
Yes. Well, first off, I want to say thank you so much, Mark, for your incredible insights. We do have one of the questions that have come up is from Mohammed, and he wants to know regarding your book. Is the book more of a how-to? What would you say is the format, or how can this help readers?
It's really the words Smalley and practical are not often encountered in a sentence. I'm more of a theoretical guy, sort of framework guy. If you take a look, Mohammed, if you take a look on Amazon, if you click on the read sample bit, you'll see the first. You see the table of contents. You'll see the first chapter. It'll give you a sort of a flavour. It's more about what to do rather than how to do it. But there is a case in there which might give you an idea about how. But and by the way, feel Mohammed and other people as well. Feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Happy to help. Oh, I just see Dan's name coming up. Hi, Dan.
Dan was unfortunately unable to join, but we let him know that there is is recorded. We will be posting it on our website, dasa.org. But it is good that we had a few people who are interested in a lot of these topics. And I know, we started the session with not really doing a deep dive into XLA, but for those who aren't familiar with XLA and experience management, can you give maybe some examples of the IT services that are being experienced? We look at also digital, you have ideas of digital friction, you have a lot of these services. So what can people kind of expect from that?
Yeah. It was an interesting topic. Lots of the other books and articles. I write lots of stuff on LinkedIn, by the way. If you're interested in my drivel, you'll find lots of it there. Lots of the stuff is about the topic of IT service and what it actually is. When I talk about IT service, I'm talking about two things at a pretty high level. It's about, first, just step back a bit. I make the distinction between IT systems and IT services. IT systems comprise software, applications, data, infrastructure, so the hard stuff. And the IT services, they're the vehicle that give people access to the systems. So IT services are about giving people access rights, the right to use the applications, the process of provisioning them, so giving them physical access to the system so that they can use them, and supporting them in their use. So either offering a service desk portal where people can solve problems for themselves, or giving them access to real people. Do you remember that, when we used to talk to real people, giving people access to
Been
real
a couple
people who
years.
can support? Yeah. So it's about access provisioning and giving people support, really, and the underlying, and sort of tying it back to XLA, the experience side. The thing that I really focus on when I'm thinking about the typical desired experience that users want to have. They want to have confidence that when they're talking with IT people, that the needs have been understood and will be accommodated. You've spoken to an IT person, but have they grasped what I actually want, and are they going to do it? That's the first thing. The confidence that your needs are being understood and accommodated. And then the feeling, and we're talking about feelings rather than the judgment, rather than judgments. The feeling that you're empowered, that you've got the ability to influence what's going on in IT, that you're engaged, that IT has involved you, the process of the concept of co-creation, which is dominant in ITIL 4, which I also had a hand in. That you're doing things together. So you want to feel empowered and engaged, that you're doing stuff together, and you want to feel supported. I think if you can work on those 5 things, that you feel that your needs are understood and accommodated, that you're empowered, engaged, and supported, then you're doing your IT services are pretty good if you're doing that.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to give one more question. Of course, actually, we have one from LinkedIn user. Unfortunately, I can't see the name right now, but can you give your idea or experience about how to connect easily to C-level? That can be on a topic like XLA or any other changes / information.
Well, if you I'm just going to go take the slides and no, hang on, I'll leave the slides as they are. If you think about that slide where I presented rational business drivers and the political concerns that people have, it's probably not going to be about reducing cost. It's more about I think if your C-level is getting signals that people are fed up with the quality of their. If we're talking about IT for internal employees instead of external customers, just take the internal case. The executives getting complaints or comments about IT not performing well, that they're slow, bureaucratic. I came up with the concept recently of digital coercion, that people feel coerced to perform like the persona that IT has come up with. Otherwise, you can't get things done. So you're forced into these bureaucratic procedures. You've got to talk IT language, otherwise they won't understand you. If you're getting complaints about that kind of stuff at executive level, then you can make a pretty decent case with an XLA improvement that you can address these concerns. That's an example, and I think there are more examples in the book. But otherwise, please get in touch with me. I'll be pleased to develop that topic.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, fun, wasn't it?
Well, it was, yes. Honestly, it's funny because I think, and we discussed this a little bit when we were looking at the topic, but, you would think customer first or customer centric is a no-brainer. But in fact, it has so many other, like you said, you're working with people, and you're really embedding a lot of these concepts into the structure of the organization. It's not just we're going to start listening to the customer through some surveys, but rather it's much more of a holistic and systemic approach to these principles. And I
Yeah,
think
it
that's
is. It
fascinating.
is. Yeah, no, it is. Sorry to interrupt. It is very much a question of, you know, you could people talk about ways of working. I'd like to make the distinction between ways of working, ways of thinking, the concepts that people use, but also ways of being, the kind of values that people have, the sense, meaningful work, what constitutes meaningful work. And this is certainly, of course, it's a way of working. XLA improves the way of working, there's ways of thinking, but certainly the way of being, which ties back to the last sentence in my previous book, which is probably a good way to close the session. In the end, it's about people's desire and ability to care about people, and it's really a serious question for organizations. How much do you really care about people? And if you probably won't get an honest answer to that. You'll get a politically correct answer to that. But if you read between the lines, if you're working for an organization that doesn't really care about people because they've got an excellent technical proposition, there's no competitors, so why bother? They feel absolutely no moral imperative to do so. Then forget it. Don't bother with your XLA stuff. You should choose a better customer or a better employer. So you've got to be realistic with it. It's got to align. If it doesn't align with something, forget it. Choose a different battle.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And that takes a lot of understanding truly what your mission is. What is that mission statement for the organization? What are your goals? What is that roadmap, and how can you bring that in? Because if your roadmap doesn't have customers as part of it, then you know
No, it's just a political reality. There's, by the way, I wrote a piece on Machiavelli. One of my LinkedIn articles is about Machiavelli, and it's incredible. So many hundred years ago, 1534, 1532, from memory, spot on human nature and what motivates people. If you kind of, read Machiavelli, that'll bring you down to earth. If you can't align with people's interests, forget it. You're in the wrong. You're playing the wrong game.
exactly. Oh,
Jess,
well,
this has been delightful.
yes, I want to again thank you so much again, Mark. This has been uh just so interesting to have you on and to get these insights, because I think experience management, it's new, it's the shift from that technology centric approach to a human centric one. And there's so much more than just, again, like I said, putting the customer first, um but rather that user satisfaction, that business impact. And it really, looking at some of these key takeaways, you can organizations can benefit a lot from XLA. It improves your profit margins. It enhances compliance. It boosts customer satisfaction and employee engagement, all of which are recipes for a successful business. Um, and of course, I want to say to our audience, if you are inspired by today's topic and you want to learn more about experience management, we encourage you to check out the DASA Experience Management Certification Program and Product Suite. You can find more information about this on our website at dasa.org. I'm also posting a link in the chat, so feel free to check that out. Please check out Mark's book on Amazon and his white paper on the DASA website. I've posted both of those in the chat as well. Mark, thank you again. This was delightful, and I really hope that people can walk away with inspired by a lot of the things you've said today, and hopefully going away with uh, that experience management is so much more than just, is the customer happy? Thank you, everyone. All right.